pregnant surrogate needed a donor, but the only match was her ex, the millionaire who left her. Tiana closed her eyes, feeling tears she'd promised herself she'd never shed over Austin Waverly again. The baby kicked weakly, as if sensing the danger. What would you do if survival meant facing your worst heartbreak? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The baby wasn't hers, but her body was failing to keep it alive. And the only person who could save them both was the man who'd already destroyed her once. Tiana Davis gripped the hospital bed rails as another wave of pain shot through her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant, carrying a child for the Mitchells, a sweet couple from Buckhead who tried for years to have their own baby. The money from this surrogacy would finally pay off her student loans and fund the mental health center she'd been dreaming about for her community in Atlanta. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. Ms. Davis, your blood pressure is dangerously high, Dr. Peterson said, his voice tight with concern. We're looking at severe preeclampsia with complications I've rarely seen. Tiana's vision blurred as machines beeped frantically around her. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd been healthy throughout the entire pregnancy, following every rule, taking every vitamin. The Mitchells were counting on her. What does that mean? She gasped, sweat beading on her forehead. Dr. Peterson exchanged glances with the nurse. You need an immediate transfusion and specialized treatment. Without it, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Both you and the baby are at serious risk. The room felt like it was closing in. Tiana had built her entire life on being self-sufficient, never needing anyone, never depending on others after learning that lesson the hard way 3 years ago. We've run your blood type through our donor database, Dr. Peterson continued, pulling up results on his tablet. The good news is we found a match. The challenging news is there's only one person in our system who's compatible with your rare blood type and specific antibody profile. Have you ever needed help from the last person you want to ask? That moment when survival meant swallowing your pride and facing the person who shattered your heart into pieces? Tiana was about to discover that rock bottom always has a basement. Who is it? She whispered, though part of her already knew. Life had a cruel sense of humor. Dr. Peterson read from his screen. Austin Waverly. He's registered as a universal donor with special compatibility markers. Lives here in Atlanta now, moved from North Carolina about 2 years ago. The world stopped spinning. Austin Waverly, the man who'd promised her forever, then called her too much baggage when her mother was dying and she'd lost her job in the same week. The tech entrepreneur who'd ghosted her so completely she'd wondered if their year together had been some elaborate dream. No, she said, shaking her head. Find someone else. There has to be someone else. Ma'am, in 16 million potential donors, he's the only match. Your blood type is AB negative with rare antibodies that... I don't care about the science. Tiana's voice cracked. I won't do it. I won't call him. Dr. Peterson sat down beside her bed. Ms. Davis, I understand this is personal, but we're talking about minutes, not hours. Your kidneys are beginning to shut down, and the baby's heart rate is becoming irregular. Tiana closed her eyes, feeling tears she'd promised herself she'd never shed over Austin Waverly again. The baby kicked weakly, as if sensing the danger. What would you do if survival meant facing your worst heartbreak? If the person who destroyed you was suddenly your only salvation? The door opened, and Mrs. Mitchell rushed in, her face pale with worry. Tiana, honey, what's happening? They called us, and she needs a donor, Dr. Peterson explained. We found one, but there are complications. Hit that like button if you've ever had to choose between pride and survival. And stick around because this story gets even more complicated. Tiana stared at the ceiling, feeling the baby's movements growing weaker. She thought about the mental health center, about all the people in her community who needed help, about the Mitchells who trusted her with their dreams. Call him, she whispered. When the doctor said the donor's name, her world stopped spinning. Austin Waverly, the man who'd called her too much baggage, was now her only lifeline. He walked into her hospital room like he owned it, designer suit, cold eyes, and the same smile that once promised her forever. Austin Waverly looked exactly the same, except richer. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp as ever, and those green eyes that used to look at her like she was his entire world now assessed her with the detachment of a business transaction. Behind him walked a woman who screamed old money, blonde, polished, wearing a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Tiana made in 3 months. Her engagement ring caught the fluorescent light, practically blinding in its perfection. "Austin," Tiana managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tiana." He nodded once, hands in his pockets. "You look." His eyes swept over her swollen form in the hospital bed. "Different." The blonde stepped forward with a practiced smile. "I'm Caroline Ashford, Austin's fiancée. We came as soon as we got the call from the hospital." She spoke with the kind of southern accent that came from finishing schools, not front porches. Tiana's heart clenched. Of course he was engaged. Of course he'd moved on to someone who fit perfectly into his world of charity galas and country clubs. Dr. Peterson cleared his throat. "Mr. Waverly, thank you for coming so quickly. As I explained on the phone, Ms. Davis needs an immediate transfusion. Your blood type and antibody profile make you uniquely compatible." Austin finally looked directly at Tiana, and for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pain? Regret? It was gone so fast she might have imagined it. "How long will this take?" Caroline asked, checking her diamond watch. "We have the rehearsal dinner planning session at 6. "About 2 hours for the full procedure," Dr. Peterson replied. "We'll need to run preliminary tests first, then." "So now you need me," Austin said quietly, his voice cutting through the medical jargon. His eyes never left Tiana's face. Funny how life works out. The words hit like a physical blow. Tiana turned her head toward the window, blinking back tears. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Have you ever faced someone who broke your heart when you were your most vulnerable? When the person who once claimed to love you looked at you like a stranger? "The baby's father," Caroline said suddenly, glancing between them. "Where is he? Shouldn't he be here for this?" "It's a surrogacy," Tiana explained, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. "I'm carrying the baby for another couple." Caroline's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Oh, how noble of you." The condescension dripped from every word, but Austin shot Caroline a sharp look that made her close her mouth. "We should get started," Dr. Peterson said, sensing the tension. "Mr. Waverly, if you'll come with me for the initial screening." As Caroline stepped out to take a call, Austin lingered by the door. The room suddenly felt smaller, charged with 3 years of unspoken words and buried hurt. Comment below if you think he should help her, and whether past hurt should matter when a life's at stake. He moved closer to her bed, voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. "There's something about this baby you don't know, Tiana. Something that changes everything." The baby she was carrying wasn't just any child. It was connected to Austin's family in ways that made helping her either an act of redemption or the biggest mistake of his life. Austin's words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Tiana's hand instinctively moved to her belly, protective and questioning at the same time. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, glancing toward the door where Caroline's voice could be heard arguing with someone on the phone about catering arrangements. Austin pulled a chair closer to her bed, his businessman mask slipping for the first time since he'd walked in. Underneath, she glimpsed the man she'd once loved. Vulnerable, conflicted, carrying secrets that weighed him down. "The fertility clinic the Mitchells used," he said quietly. "Ashford Reproductive Medicine. It's owned by Caroline's family." Tiana's blood ran cold. So they don't just match surrogates randomly, Tiana. They have specific criteria. Genetic profiles they're looking for. Austin ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their late-night conversations when he'd wrestle with difficult decisions. "You're scaring me," she said, though part of her had always wondered why the Mitchells had chosen her specifically when there were so many other potential surrogates. Austin leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "My family has a rare genetic condition. It's been in our bloodline for generations, but it also comes with advantages. Enhanced immune system, resistance to certain diseases, accelerated healing. That's impossible, Tiana breathed. The fertility clinic has been tracking families like mine for years. They use our genetic material in their procedures, creating children who carry these traits. His green eyes met hers, and she saw fear there. Tiana, I think this baby isn't just genetically enhanced. I think it's mine. The room began to spin. The machines monitoring her vital signs started beeping faster as her heart rate spiked. That's crazy, she gasped. The Mitchells are the parents. They used Mr. Mitchell's genetic material and a donor egg. I saw the paperwork. Did you see the genetic testing results? Did anyone ever explain why you were specifically chosen for this pregnancy? Before she could answer, Caroline swept back into the room, her phone call apparently finished. She took one look at Austin's proximity to Tiana's bed, and her expression hardened. Darling, the doctor is ready for your screening, she said, her voice sweet as poison honey. We shouldn't keep them waiting. Austin stood reluctantly, but his eyes remained locked on Tiana's. Think about it, he said softly. Think about how you were selected, what questions they asked, what tests they ran. What would you do if helping someone meant exposing your family's darkest secret? If saving a life meant risking everything you built? As Austin left with Caroline, Tiana's mind raced through the memory of her surrogacy application process. The extensive genetic testing, the detailed family history questionnaires, the strange questions about her relationship history. Questions that had specifically asked about Austin Waverly. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know what Austin's family has been hiding. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming. That night, Caroline found Austin staring out their hotel window at the Atlanta skyline, his shoulders tense with unspoken conflict. When Caroline found Austin's old engagement ring hidden in his wallet, the one meant for Tiana, she realized this wasn't about charity. This was about unfinished business. She'd built walls around her heart for 3 years, but lying in that hospital bed, she realized some doors never fully close. 3 years ago, Tiana had been working as a social worker in Charlotte, barely making ends meet, but passionate about helping kids navigate the foster care system. Her mother was battling stage 4 cancer, and the medical bills were drowning them both. Austin had been different then, or so she'd thought. He'd volunteer at the community center where she ran support groups, rolling up his sleeves to help serve meals and actually listening when the kids talked about their dreams. He'd seemed genuine, real, like someone who understood that money couldn't buy the things that mattered most. I love how you see people, he told her one night as they cleaned up after a particularly difficult group session. You see their potential, not their problems. They dated for 14 months. He'd met her mother, sat by her hospital bed, reading stories when Tiana had to work double shifts. He talked about marriage, about building something beautiful together, about using his business success to fund the program she dreamed of creating. Then everything fell apart at once. Her mother's cancer spread faster than expected. Tiana lost her job when budget cuts eliminated her position. The medical bills became overwhelming, and she had to ask Austin for help. Not a handout, but a loan she'd planned to pay back with interest. His response still echoed in her mind 3 years later. Tiana, I care about you, but this is too much. I need someone who can stand beside me, not someone I have to constantly rescue. You're drowning, and I can't let you pull me down with you. He'd packed his bags that night and moved back to North Carolina within a week. No calls, no texts, no explanation beyond those crushing words. She found out through social media that he'd started dating Caroline 2 months later. Now, watching him donate his blood to save her life, Tiana didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the cruel irony. Have you ever had to accept help from someone who hurt you deeply? How did you handle the conflict between need and pride? Caroline appeared in the doorway, her perfect smile not quite reaching her eyes. How are you feeling, sweetie? She asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really care about the answer. Better, thank you, Tiana replied carefully. Good. Austin's just finishing up with the doctors. Such a saint, really, helping out a... Caroline paused delicately, friend in need. The word friend carried enough venom to kill a snake. Let me know in the comments. Do you think people can really change, or do they just get better at hiding who they really are? Caroline moved closer to the bed, her voice dropping to a whisper. You know, after this is all over, it would probably be best if you didn't contact Austin again. He's worked so hard to build his new life, and dredging up old relationships would just be messy. The night before the procedure, Tiana overheard Caroline on the phone. Don't worry, Mother. Once this is over, I'll make sure that woman never comes between us again. But Caroline didn't know Tiana was recording every word. As they wheeled her into surgery, she wasn't thinking about the baby or her own survival. She was wondering if the man holding her hand was saving her life or settling an old debt. The pre-op room buzzed with controlled chaos. Nurses prepped 4 lines while Dr. Peterson reviewed surgical notes one final time. Tiana's blood pressure had stabilized slightly after Austin's initial transfusion, but the baby's heart rate remained dangerously irregular. We need to deliver the baby tonight, Dr. Peterson explained to the gathered crowd around her bed. 8 months is early, but staying in utero is more dangerous at this point. Mrs. Mitchell squeezed Tiana's other hand, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered, for everything you've done, everything you're risking. Austin stood beside the bed in surgical scrubs, having given 2 units of blood with more standing by if needed during the operation. His face was pale but determined, and for the first time since he'd walked back in her life, he looked like the man she'd once loved. Caroline paced by the window, her heels clicking against the tile floor in an annoying rhythm. She'd changed into a simple dress, her earlier designer clothes replaced by something more appropriate for a hospital vigil. Though even her casual clothes probably cost more than most people's rent. How long will the surgery take? Caroline asked for the 3rd time. 2 to 3 hours, Dr. Peterson replied patiently. We'll keep Mr. Waverly on standby in case additional transfusions are needed. As they prepared to move Tiana to the operating room, Austin stepped closer. His hand brushed against her forehead, and the familiar touch sent electricity through her entire body despite the circumstances. You're going to be fine, he said softly, though his eyes betrayed his worry. Both of you. Austin, she whispered, catching his hand before he could pull away. Whatever happens, take care of the baby. Promise me. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the careful control he'd maintained since arriving. Nothing's going to happen to you, Tiana. I won't let it. The words carried weight beyond their medical situation, echoing with all the protection he'd failed to provide 3 years ago. When was the last time you realized you might lose something precious forever? That moment when regret becomes unbearable? Caroline moved to Austin's other side, slipping her arm through his. Come on, darling. Let the doctors do their work. But Austin didn't move. His eyes remained locked on Tiana's face as if memorizing every detail. I should have, he started, then stopped, shaking his head. We'll talk when you wake up. The anesthesiologist appeared with a mask. Time ago, Ms. Davis. Count backward from 10 for me. 10 I'm. Tiana's eyes found Austin's one last time. 8, 7. The world faded to black, but not before she heard him whisper something that sounded like, I'm sorry. In the waiting room, Austin paced like a caged animal while Caroline sat primly in a chair, scrolling through her phone. The Mitchells huddled together, holding hands and praying quietly. She'll be fine, Caroline said without looking up from her screen. These procedures are routine nowadays. Austin stopped pacing and stared at his fiancée. Routine? She could die, Caroline. The baby could die. But they won't, Caroline replied coolly. And then we can all move on with our lives. The coldness in her voice made Austin's stomach turn. What had Caroline become so calculating? Or had she always been this way? And he'd been too distracted by her beauty and social connections to notice? If this story has you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and tell me, do you think they'll both survive this? 2 hours into the surgery, Dr. Peterson emerged from the operating room, his scrubs stained with blood and his expression grim. As Tiana flatlined on the operating table, Austin collapsed in the waiting room, and Caroline smiled. Problem solved, she texted someone, but she had no idea that Tiana's phone was still recording in her purse. She was fighting for 2 lives in that operating room. but he was fighting for his soul in the hallway, and both battles would determine if love gets a second chance. The heart monitor's flat line screamed through the operating room as Dr. Peterson and his team worked frantically to revive Tiana. Her body had gone into shock during the emergency C-section, blood pressure crashing as they delivered the tiny baby girl who came out silent and blue. "Come on, Tiana," Dr. Peterson muttered, pressing the defibrillator paddles to her chest. "Don't you dare give up now." In the waiting room, Austin felt the exact moment her heart stopped. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was some connection left over from their shared blood, or maybe it was something deeper, but he knew. His knees buckled, and he hit the floor hard, gasping like he couldn't breathe. "Austin," Caroline rushed to his side, but her concern felt performative, like she was playing a role for the audience of nurses and the Mitchells. "She's dying," he whispered, staring at the operating room doors. "I can feel it." "Don't be ridiculous," Caroline snapped, though her voice wavered. "You can't possibly know that." But Austin did know. Just like he'd known 3 years ago that walking away from Tiana was the biggest mistake of his life. Just like he'd known every day since that he'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him because he was too scared to fight for something real. Mr. Mitchell sat in the corner, holding his wife as she sobbed into his shoulder. They'd waited so long for this baby, gone through so much heartbreak and disappointment. Now, their surrogate might die bringing their child into the world. Have you ever had a moment where life forced you to confront your biggest regrets? When you realized running away solved nothing. Austin's phone buzzed with a text from Caroline's mother. "How much longer?" The family is getting impatient. He stared at the message, confusion cutting through his panic. What family? Why would Caroline's mother care about Tiana's surgery? Before he could ask, Dr. Peterson burst through the operating room doors, still in bloody scrubs, his face grim but relieved. "She's stable," he announced, and Austin felt like he could breathe again. It was touch and go for several minutes, but we got her back. The baby is in the NICU. She's small but breathing on her own. Mrs. Mitchell collapsed with relief while her husband peppered the doctor with questions about their daughter's condition. "Can I see her?" Austin asked, surprising everyone, including himself. Caroline's grip tightened on his arm. "Austin, we should go. The crisis is over, and we have that dinner with my parents tonight." "I'm not leaving," he said firmly, pulling away from her. "Not until I know she's really okay." "Why do you care so much?" Caroline's mask was slipping, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "She's just some girl from your past." "Some girl?" Austin turned to stare at his fiancée, like he was seeing her for the first time. "Caroline, I was going to marry her. She was everything to me before Before you what?" Caroline's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Before I threw it all away because I was too much of a coward to fight for what mattered." Comment below with a heart if you believe in second chances, and subscribe because this story is about to take another shocking turn. In the recovery room, Tiana's eyes fluttered open to find Austin sitting beside her bed, holding her hand like he'd never let go again. When Tiana's eyes fluttered open, the first face she saw wasn't Austin's. It was Caroline's, leaning over her with a pillow. "You should have stayed unconscious," Caroline whispered. She survived surgery only to discover the real threat wasn't her medical condition. It was the woman who saw her as an obstacle to eliminate. Tiana's vision was blurry from the anesthesia, but there was no mistaking the cold hatred in Caroline's blue eyes as she pressed the pillow closer to Tiana's face. "You just couldn't stay away, could you?" Caroline hissed. 3 years wasn't enough. You had to find a way to crawl back into his life. Tiana tried to speak, but her throat was raw from the breathing tube. She managed only a weak gasp as Caroline's perfectly manicured hands tightened their grip. Austin was finally moving on. We were building something real, something that mattered. Then you show up, playing the victim, making him feel guilty about ancient history. Panic gave Tiana strength she didn't know she had. She grabbed Caroline's wrists, fighting against the suffocating pressure of the pillow. "The funny thing is," Caroline continued, her voice eerily calm, "nobody will question it. Complications from surgery happen all the time. Poor girl survived the operation only to have her heart give out during recovery. The door burst open, and Austin's voice cut through the room like a blade. "What the hell are you doing?" Caroline spun around, the pillow falling to the floor. "Darling, I was just adjusting her pillow." She seemed uncomfortable. But Austin's eyes went straight to Tiana's terrified face, to the red marks on her wrists where she'd fought back, to the pillow on the floor that shouldn't have been anywhere near her face. "Get away from her," he said quietly, his voice carrying a threat that made Caroline step back. "Austin, you're being ridiculous." "I was helping. I said get away from her." Austin moved to Tiana's bedside, his hands gentle as he checked her breathing. "Are you okay? Can you talk?" Tiana nodded weakly, pointing to her purse on the bedside table. Austin followed her gaze, confused, until she managed to whisper, "Recording. Have you ever discovered someone you trusted was capable of unthinkable things? How do you process that betrayal?" Austin grabbed the purse and found Tiana's phone, still recording from the night before. He scrolled back through hours of audio, his face growing darker with each revelation he uncovered. Caroline's voice came through clearly. "Don't worry, Mother. Once this is over, I'll make sure that woman never comes between us again." Then her conversation with someone else. "The family is getting impatient. How much longer?" And finally, the most damning evidence. Caroline on the phone just minutes before. "She's awake. I'll handle it now. One way or another. This instant night." "Security," Austin called, pressing the nurse's button. "I need security in here immediately." Caroline's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing, Austin. My family has invested too much in this situation to let some nobody ruin everything." "Invested in what situation?" Austin demanded. "If you saw the red flags in Caroline from the beginning, let me know in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed because justice is about to be served." As police led Caroline away, she turned back with a chilling smile. "You think this ends it? You have no idea what you're both walking into. His family will never let this go." For the first time, Austin looked genuinely afraid. The donation that saved her life was just the beginning. Austin's family had been watching, waiting, and planning something that would change everything she thought she knew about the baby she carried. 2 days after Caroline's arrest, Austin's parents arrived in Atlanta like a storm system nobody saw coming. Margaret and Richard Waverly swept in a hospital with an entourage of lawyers, doctors, and assistants that made the intensive care floor feel like a corporate boardroom. Tiana was sitting up in bed, finally strong enough to hold the tiny baby girl she'd carried for 8 months. The Mitchells had named her Hope, and despite being premature, she was thriving in ways that amazed the medical staff. "So you're the young woman who's caused such a disruption," Margaret Waverly said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from generations of old money and older secrets. Austin stood protectively beside Tiana's bed. "Mother, Tiana just had major surgery. Whatever this is about can wait." "I'm afraid it can't," Richard interrupted, setting a briefcase on the rolling table. "Miss Davis, we need to discuss the child you're holding." "Her name is Hope," Tiana said firmly, "and she belongs to the Mitchells. They're her legal parents." Margaret exchanged a look with her husband that made Austin's jaw tighten. "Actually, dear, that's where things get complicated." Richard opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "The fertility clinic you used, Ashford Reproductive Medicine, has been conducting unauthorized genetic modifications for our family's research foundation for the past decade." "What are you talking about?" Tiana's arms tightened around baby Hope. "They've been using genetic material from our bloodline without the knowledge of the intended parents or surrogates," Margaret explained with the casual tone someone might use to discuss the weather. "Creating children who carry specific genetic markers that are valuable to our pharmaceutical research." Austin's face went white. "You can't be serious. Deadly serious, son. That child carries genetic material that's worth approximately $50 million in medical patents and research applications. Have you ever been caught between loyalty to family and doing what's right? When blood isn't thicker than conscience." Tiana felt sick. "You're talking about Hope like she's property. In a sense, She is, Richard replied coolly. Our genetic material, our research, our investment. The Mitchells were simply unknowing participants in a controlled breeding program. That's monstrous, Austin said, moving closer to Tiana and the baby. That's business, Margaret corrected. And you, Austin, have been a part of this research whether you knew it or not. Your blood donation wasn't just compatible by accident. We've been monitoring your genetic markers since birth. The room felt like it was closing in. Tiana looked down at Hope's perfect little face, understanding now why she'd been specifically chosen as a surrogate, why the fertility clinic had asked so many questions about her genetic background and relationship history. The baby can't leave this hospital, Richard announced, until custody arrangements are finalized in our favor. Over my dead body, Austin said. Margaret smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That could be arranged too, dear. Caroline was supposed to handle things more quietly, but since that plan failed, we'll have to be more direct. Drop a comment if you think Austin will choose Tiana over his family's money. And hit subscribe because this battle is just getting started. When Austin's father handed her the contract, $10 million to give up all rights to the baby and never contact Austin again, she realized this wasn't about love or redemption. This was about bloodlines, money, and a genetic jackpot she was carrying in her womb. $10 million to walk away from the man who broke her heart and the baby that wasn't even hers. It should have been the easiest decision of her life. The contract sat on Tiana's hospital bed like a coiled snake, its legal language hiding the poison within. $10 million in exchange for signing away any connection to Hope and disappearing from Austin's life forever. Think about it, Miss Davis, Margaret Waverly said, her voice smooth as silk. $10 million could fund a dozen mental health centers in your community. You could help thousands of people instead of fighting a battle you can't win over one child that isn't even biologically yours. Austin paced the small room like a trapped animal. Don't listen to them, Tiana. They can't force you to sign anything. Actually, we can, Richard interrupted, pulling out another set of documents. The surrogacy contract you signed with the Mitchells contains clauses about genetic complications and family medical history. Our lawyers have found several grounds for nullification. Tiana's head was spinning. The Mitchells sat in the corner, holding each other, tears streaming down their faces as they watched their dreams of parenthood crumble before their eyes. What about them? Tiana pointed to the heartbroken couple. They're Hope's real parents. They chose her, wanted her, planned for her. They can apply to adopt another child through conventional means, Margaret said dismissively. This particular infant has medical significance beyond what they can understand or manage. What price would you put on your integrity? Is there an amount of money that could make you betray your principles? The door opened, and Dr. Peterson entered with a grim expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Someone has filed an injunction preventing the baby from leaving the hospital. All visitors except immediate family have been restricted. Austin's parents shared a satisfied look. That would be our legal team ensuring the child's safety, Richard said. Safety from what? Tiana demanded. From people who don't understand what's at stake here, Margaret replied. Miss Davis, you're holding approximately $50 million worth of genetic research in your arms. Do you really think we're the only ones who know about this child's value? As if summoned by her words, Tiana's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know about the baby. Others are coming. Trust no one. Austin grabbed the phone, his face darkening as he read the message. Who else knows about this? Genetic research is a competitive field, Richard said ominously. We're not the only family interested in rare bloodlines and enhanced DNA sequences. The weight of the situation crashed down on Tiana. It wasn't just about choosing between money and morality anymore. It was about protecting an innocent baby from becoming a commodity in some twisted genetic marketplace. Tell me in the comments what you would do. Take the money and run, or fight for what's right. Subscribe to see what choice she makes. Hope stirred in her arms, tiny fingers wrapping around Tiana's thumb with surprising strength. As she signed the contract, Austin burst through the door. Don't do it, Tiana. I found out why they really want this baby, and it's not about medicine. It's about murder. The genetic gift the baby carried wasn't just valuable. It was evidence of crimes Austin's family would kill to keep buried. Austin's face was pale, his hands shaking as he held a manila envelope that looked like it contained the secrets of a universe, or at least enough secrets to destroy the Waverly family empire. "Put that contract down, Tiana," he said urgently. "You can't sign it. Not when you know what they've really been doing." Margaret stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. "Austin, you don't know what you're talking about. Give me those documents." "No." Austin's voice was stronger than Tiana had heard it since he'd walked back into her life. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. Caroline wasn't just my fiancée. She was reporting everything to you. Every conversation, every feeling, every moment of doubt." He pulled photos from the envelope, spreading them across the hospital bed. Tiana gasped as she saw images of children, dozens of them, with medical charts and genetic test results attached. "These are all the babies born through the Ashford fertility program over the past 10 years, Austin said. "Every single one genetically modified using our family's DNA." Richard's face had gone from confident to dangerous. "Those are private medical records. Where did you get them?" "Caroline's laptop. She never logged out after her arrest." Austin's eyes met Tiana's. "Tiana, they haven't just been creating genetically enhanced children. They've been eliminating the ones who don't meet their standards." The room went silent except for the steady beeping of hospital machines and Hope's soft breathing. "That's ridiculous," Margaret said, but her voice lacked conviction. Austin pulled out more documents, death certificates, medical reports, insurance claims. Sudden infant death syndrome, rare heart defects, genetic complications. All babies who carried the modified DNA but showed signs of defects. How far would you go to protect an innocent child from people who see them as property? When does family become the enemy? Tiana looked down at Hope, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, unaware that her entire existence had been planned by monsters masquerading as medical researchers. "Hope isn't just genetically valuable," Austin continued. "She's evidence. Her DNA contains markers that prove what they've been doing. If the right people tested her blood, the entire program would be exposed," Dr. Peterson said from the doorway. None of them had heard him enter, but his face showed he'd heard enough. "How many children are we talking about?" 47 confirmed births, Austin said quietly. 19 deaths from complications in the first year of life. Mrs. Mitchell let out a sob that seemed to come from her soul. "You're talking about murder. Mass murder of babies. We're talking about necessary medical research," Richard said coldly, all pretense of grandfatherly concern gone. "Some specimens don't develop properly. It's unfortunate but unavoidable." "Specimens." Tiana's voice cracked with rage. "You're talking about children. Innocent babies." Margaret moved toward the bed, her eyes fixed on Hope. "That child contains the culmination of decades of research. She cannot leave this hospital." "Like hell she can't," Austin said, stepping between his mother and Tiana. If this story has your heart racing, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're about to find out just how dangerous Austin's family really is. Safe house secured. Tiana went into labor 3 weeks early. But as Austin held her hand through contractions, armed men surrounded the building. "They found us," he whispered, and she realized this baby might be born into a war zone. She was bringing life into the world while death waited outside the door. And the only thing standing between them was the man who'd once abandoned her. The safe house Dr. Peterson had arranged was a small medical facility 40 miles outside Atlanta, staffed by doctors who specialized in witness protection cases. But as Tiana's contractions intensified, black SUVs surrounded the building like wolves circling their prey. "How do they find us?" Tiana gasped between waves of pain. Austin peered through the blinds at the armed men taking positions around the building. "My family has resources I didn't know about. Military contractors, private security firms." "The baby's coming now," Dr. Peterson announced, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "We can't wait any longer." The Mitchells huddled in the corner, terror and hope warring on their faces as they watched their daughter prepare to enter a world that wanted to use her as a weapon. Austin, Tiana grabbed his hand as another contraction hit. Promise me something, anything. If something happens to me, don't let them take hope. Whatever it costs, whatever you have to sacrifice, protect her. Nothing's going to happen to you, he said fiercely. I won't lose you again. What would you sacrifice to protect someone who isn't even your own child? When does love become stronger than blood? The lights went out suddenly, plunging the facility into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow that made the delivery room feel like a scene from a nightmare. They're jamming our communications, one of the security guards reported. No cell service, no landlines. Austin's phone had one last message that came through before the signal died. Surrender the child and the woman lives. You have 10 minutes. That's not happening, Austin said, moving to help Dr. Peterson with the delivery preparations. I need to push, Tiana announced, and suddenly nothing else mattered except bringing hope safely into the world. Outside, they could hear vehicles moving, men shouting orders, the sound of equipment being positioned. Austin's family had come prepared for war. I can see the head, Dr. Peterson said. One more push, Tiana. At that exact moment, the front door exploded inward. Armed men in tactical gear stormed through the building, their boots thundering against the floor as they searched room by room. Stay down, Austin ordered the Mitchells, then positioned himself between the delivery table and the door. Tiana screamed, part from the effort of childbirth, part from terror, as Hope's tiny body slid into Dr. Peterson's waiting hands. She's here, the doctor announced, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the delivery room door being kicked open. Richard Waverly stood in the doorway with two armed men, his expensive suit incongruous with the military-grade weapons his companions carried. Step away from the child, Austin, his father ordered. Go to hell, Austin replied, not taking his eyes off his newborn daughter as Dr. Peterson quickly cleaned her and wrapped her in a blanket. Hope's first cry filled the room, strong, healthy, defiant. She was small but perfect, her tiny fingers already grasping for something to hold on to. You can't protect them forever, Richard said. We have this building surrounded. There's nowhere to run. Maybe not, Austin said, accepting Hope from Dr. Peterson and cradling her against his chest. But I can make sure you never get what you want. He pulled out a vial of clear liquid that Dr. Peterson had prepared, something that would neutralize the genetic markers in Hope's blood, making her worthless to his family's research. One injection, Austin said, holding the syringe up where his father could see it. And your $50 million investment becomes just another beautiful baby girl. Comment below if you're Team Austin and Tiana, and subscribe because you won't believe how this ends. As she held the crying baby, genetic tests revealed the ultimate truth. This child wasn't just carrying Austin's family's rare genes. The baby was genetically Austin's own offspring, impossible as it seemed. The intended parents stared in shock as Austin whispered, "How is this possible?" The baby she'd carried for 9 months was genetically Austin's child. But the science behind it would expose a conspiracy that reached back generations. Dr. Peterson stared at the genetic test results, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "This is impossible," he muttered, running the tests again on his portable equipment. "What's impossible?" Tiana asked weakly, still recovering from the delivery while Austin held Hope protectively against his chest. "According to these results," Dr. Peterson said slowly, "this baby is a genetic match to both of you. Not just compatible, she's actually your biological daughter." The room went silent except for Hope's soft breathing and the distant sounds of Richard's men securing the building. "That can't be right," Mrs. Mitchell said, her voice breaking. "We used my husband's genetic material and a donor egg. The paperwork was falsified," Richard interrupted from the doorway, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and menace. "The Ashford Clinic has been using Austin's genetic material in their procedures for 3 years." Austin's face went white. 3 years? But that means every surrogacy, every fertility treatment, every successful pregnancy that Clinic has produced using our genetic enhancement program has been using your DNA, son. You've fathered dozens of children without ever knowing it. Tiana felt like the world was tilting off its axis. You mean Hope is actually your biological daughter, Richard confirmed, created using Austin's genetic material and enhanced eggs from our donor program. The surrogate mothers never knew, the intended parents never knew. Only we knew. If you discovered your family had been manipulating your genetics without consent, how would you react? When does science cross into violation? The Mitchells collapsed into each other, their dreams of parenthood crumbling as they realized the child they planned for and loved was never truly theirs. All those couples, Austin said, his voice hollow, all those families who thought they were getting donor material, were getting the opportunity to raise genetically superior children, Richard finished. Children with enhanced immune systems, superior intelligence, resistance to genetic diseases. We've been improving the human race, one birth at a time. You've been stealing people's choices, Tiana said angrily. Creating children without consent, lying to families, playing God with people's lives. We've been advancing medical science, Margaret said, appearing beside her husband with her own armed escort. Those children will live longer, healthier lives than they ever would have naturally. Hope stirred in Austin's arms, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger. The gesture seemed to give him strength because when he looked up at his parents, his expression was pure steel. It ends now, he said quietly. All of it. The program, the lies, the genetic manipulation. I'm turning over every document, every file, every piece of evidence to the authorities. You'll destroy your own daughter in the process, Margaret warned. Once this becomes public, she'll be a target for every research organization and government agency in the world. Then we'll protect her, Tiana said, reaching out to touch Hope's cheek. Together, let me know in the comments who you think should raise this baby, and make sure you're subscribed for the shocking conclusion. Judge's ruling would determine the baby's future, but as they waited for the decision, Tiana noticed something that changed everything. Austin, look at her eyes. She has your mother's eyes. Your real mother, not the woman who raised you. There's more to this story. The woman Austin called mother wasn't his biological parent, and the genetic conspiracy ran deeper than anyone imagined, connecting 3 generations of lies. Austin stared down at Hope's face, studying the unusual violet blue eyes that seemed too familiar. They weren't his eyes, or Tiana's, or even Margaret's cold blue stare. They were the eyes from a photograph he'd found hidden in his father's desk years ago. A photograph of a woman Richard claimed was a distant relative who died young. Those eyes, he whispered. I've seen them before. Austin, what are you talking about? Tiana asked, though something in her voice suggested she was beginning to understand. Margaret's composed mask finally cracked. Richard, we need to leave. Now. Not until we get what we came for, Richard replied, but his confidence was wavering. Dr. Peterson was still running genetic comparisons on his equipment. Mr. Waverly, I'm seeing markers in your DNA that don't match your supposed parents. The genetic structure suggests that Austin isn't their biological son either, Tiana finished, the pieces falling into place. Austin looked up at the people he'd called parents his entire life. Who am I really? You're our son in every way that matters, Margaret said desperately. We raised you, provided for you, gave you everything. After you stole me from my real family, Austin said, his voice deadly quiet. Just like you've been stealing children through the fertility program. Richard's jaw tightened. Your biological parents were nobody special. Drug addicts who couldn't care for you properly. We gave you a better life. You gave me a lie. Austin shot back. How many other children have you taken? How many families have you destroyed? How would you handle discovering your entire identity was built on lies? That the people you trusted most had stolen your life? The sound of sirens cut through the night air, distant but getting closer. Someone had called for backup, and it wasn't Richard's people. Dr. Peterson, Tiana said urgently. Can you trace Austin's real family using his genetic markers? Already working on it, the doctor replied, his fingers flying over his tablet. The database is extensive, and with the samples we have, his face went pale as results populated on his screen. Austin, your biological mother, is still alive. Her name is Elena Santos, and she's been searching for you for 30 years. That's impossible, Margaret snapped. We were told both parents died in a car accident. You were lied to, Dr. Peterson said, turning his tablet to show them a missing child report for 1994. Austin Santos, age 2, kidnapped from a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. His mother, Elena, was a nurse. His father, Marcus, was a police detective. Austin felt like the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. They're alive. Your mother is. Your father died 5 years ago, but he never stopped looking for you. Elena still lives in Phoenix, still hoping someday you'd come home. The sirens were getting louder now. Through the windows, they could see FBI vehicles surrounding the building, agents in bulletproof vests taking positions. This is Agent Martinez with the FBI. A voice boomed through a megaphone. The building is surrounded. Release the hostages and surrender immediately. If this twist shocked you, hit that like button and subscribe because the final revelations will blow your mind. Austin's real mother, now in her 70s, held her genetic granddaughter and whispered, "I've been searching for you for 30 years. And now I can finally tell you the truth about why they took you, and why this baby is the key to bringing them all down." 3 generations of stolen children, manipulated genetics, and buried crimes were about to face justice. And it all started with one baby's DNA. 6 months later, Atlanta's federal courthouse buzzed with media attention as the Waverly genetic trafficking trial reached its conclusion. Austin sat in the front row, holding hope while Tiana testified about her experience as an unwitting surrogate in the illegal program. "The defendants used my body as an incubator for their genetic experiments," Tiana said, her voice strong and clear. "They stole genetic material from Austin Waverly without his consent, manipulated fertility procedures across multiple states, and murdered children who didn't meet their standards." The evidence was overwhelming. Caroline had provided a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence, detailing 30 years of genetic theft, illegal adoptions, and systematic murder of defective babies. The Ashford Fertility Clinic had been shut down, its records seized, revealing a network of corruption that reached into government agencies and medical institutions across the country. Richard and Margaret Waverly sat at the defense table, their expensive lawyers unable to counter the mountain of DNA evidence, financial records, and victim testimony that had buried their empire. "Your Honor," the prosecutor announced, "the state has identified 47 children born through this illegal program, 19 of whom died under suspicious circumstances. We're seeking life sentences without the possibility of parole. Have you ever seen justice served for crimes that seem too powerful to prosecute when the system actually works?" In the gallery, Elena Santos, Austin's real mother, sat beside them, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son hold his daughter. At 73, she was exactly as Austin had imagined her, strong, kind, with the same violet blue eyes that Hope had inherited. "I never stopped believing you were alive," she told him at their reunion 3 months earlier. "I kept your bedroom exactly the same for 30 years, just in case you came home." The Mitchells had been granted visitation rights with Hope, understanding that while she wasn't biologically theirs, the love they'd felt during the pregnancy was real. They'd become part of Austin and Tiana's extended family, helping to raise the little girl who'd brought them all together. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Harrison asked. "We have, Your Honor. On all counts of conspiracy, kidnapping, genetic manipulation, and murder, we find the defendants guilty." The courthouse erupted in cheers from the families of victims, while Richard and Margaret showed no emotion as they were led away in handcuffs. Austin reached over and took Tiana's hand. "It's over," he said softly. "No," she replied, smiling as Hope gurgled happily in his arms. "It's just beginning." Comment below if you believe in karma and justice, and subscribe because the ending will restore your faith in love. Outside the courthouse, Austin stopped on the courthouse steps and dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple diamond ring. Not the massive rock he'd bought for Caroline, but something meaningful and real. As they walked out of the courthouse with their daughter, legally theirs now, Austin stopped on the steps. "I need to ask you something, and this time I want to do it right." When he dropped to one knee, she realized this wasn't about obligation or guilt anymore. This was about choice. She started as a surrogate carrying someone else's baby and ended up with a family she never dared to dream was possible. 1 year later, Austin and Tiana stood in the same Atlanta hospital where their story had begun, but this time they weren't patients. They were advocates, speaking to a room full of medical professionals about genetic ethics and informed consent. Hope toddled between them, her violet blue eyes bright with curiosity as she explored the conference room, while Austin presented the Santos Foundation, named after his real family, which provided legal support for victims of genetic trafficking and fertility fraud. The children born through these illegal programs deserve to know their true origins, Austin told the assembled doctors and nurses. Families deserve honest medical information, and surrogates deserve to know exactly what they're carrying and why. Tiana adjusted the simple gold wedding band on her finger, still amazed sometimes that the fairy tale was real. Their wedding 6 months earlier had been small, but perfect. Elena Santos walking Austin down the aisle while the Mitchells took turns holding Hope, who'd babbled happily through the entire ceremony. The medical community has a responsibility to prevent these abuses from happening again, Tiana added, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd survived the system's worst violations. Genetic material is not property to be stolen or manipulated without consent. Dr. Peterson, who'd become their closest ally in the fight for reform, stood up from the audience. What can we do to ensure this never happens again? Transparency, Austin replied immediately. Full genetic disclosure for all fertility procedures. Independent oversight of all genetic research programs. And criminal penalties for anyone who violates informed consent. After the presentation, they drove to Phoenix to visit Elena Santos, who'd become the grandmother Hope adored. Elena's small house was filled with photos now. Pictures of Austin's childhood that she'd missed, images of Hope's first steps, family portraits that spanned 3 generations brought together by truth. She has your father's stubborn streak, Elena told Austin, watching Hope refuse to eat her vegetables with determined rebellion. In your eyes, Austin replied, kissing his mother's cheek. Thank you for never giving up. I had to believe you'd come home someday, Elena said. Love doesn't die just because people disappear. What would you do if your worst experience became the foundation for your greatest purpose? When pain transforms into power. That evening, as they put Hope to bed in the nursery Austin had built with his own hands, Tiana marveled at how completely their lives had changed. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Walking away from all that money, destroying your family's empire? Austin pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist as they watched their daughter sleep. The only thing I regret is the 3 years I wasted being afraid to fight for what mattered. And what matters? Tiana asked, though she already knew the answer. This, he said simply. You, Hope, the family we've built. The real family, not the one based on lies and stolen genetics. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of love, justice, and redemption. Tell me in the comments what part of their journey inspired you most. Sometimes the family we're meant to have isn't the one we're born into. It's the one we choose to build. And sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with a meet cute, but with a second chance at doing everything right.